Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, artists, you name it, all over the world, crypto and blockchain. And today I have an amazing guest. He is, I'm honored to have him as a guest too. He is the founder of Storm Labs. His name is Sunil Srivatsa. Sunil, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. So let's kick things off, and I'll ask you first. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really feel like a lot of parts of my life had all combined to lead me into crypto. I actually studied computer science and finance in school, and then for my first job out of college, ended up working at Square, which was like right at the intersection of kind of like payments, finance, and technology. Um, I had heard about Bitcoin around, I want to say 2011 or 2012, but didn't do anything at the time, but it was kind of on my radar. And then around 2017, first bought my first Ethereum and started participating in, some of the ecosystems. Um, and then in early 2020, this was kind of like the precursor to DeFi summer. Got really interested with the Yearn ecosystem in particular. This developer called Andre Conhe had basically created these kind of like interest-bearing tokens, which I thought just made complete sense. And at the time, I was working at my job at Uber, where I was at for about 5 years prior to jumping into the space full time. And at some point in time, I was just couldn't resist jumping in and working, in DeFi full time.
Very cool. Very cool. So, what is Storm Labs all about, and what makes you guys stand out in the ever competing DeFi space?
Yeah, totally. So Storm Labs is really about building and sharing technology that enables economic empowerment for everyone. I'd say one of the real unique things about us is we're a relatively small company, only 5 folks, and all of us are pretty avid users of DeFi and crypto in general. So we are really plugged into this space and trying to build products and solutions that we hope we ourselves will find useful as well as other folks.
Great, great. So, let's get into DeFi, right? You're focused on DeFi, and I want to know from your perspective, what the current global DeFi landscape looks like right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would just preface all of this with DeFi is still relatively new, right? Like this all only became a thing at the very beginning of last cycle. So relative to crypto at large and the more traditional financial system, DeFi is still really, really early on in its life cycle. Um, I think you can kind of view the space as various segments. Obviously, there's more traditional stuff like lending, so that would be protocols like Compound or Aave. You have automated market makers, the most well-known of which is like Uniswap. You also have stuff like derivatives and perpetuals trading. That'll be chains like DYDX. So you really have protocols that kind of span the entire gamut of what you'll find in traditional finance, as well as some new primitives and things that crypto and DeFi in particular enable that aren't possible to do in traditional finance.
So I'm trying to think back to the beginning of last cycle, right? Things look a little bit different now. I had this token that was airdropped to me back in 2017 called ETHLend that became Aave, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I had initial Storm tokens which converted to a different one, but I missed the window to convert them. So I had about 800 or 1,000 initial Storm tokens, right? Things moved on from the little from the tokens, just only a token, to being able to graduate to this better level of finance, right? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think if we had to pinpoint a specific event, it would probably be when Compound launched their governance token, Comp, and started distributing it to users of the protocol. And that was what really kicked off kind of what we call farming and liquidity mining today, which was just a completely new concept, right? Imagine if, like Uber, for example, gave equity to drivers and riders from when the company was started. That's kind of what the same sort of model that Compound pioneered, where they were started to give away network equity to people who are actually using the protocol, which I think is something that's really powerful.
Got it. So it's the creation of network equity to share with others that really launched it off. Interesting.
Totally, yeah. At the end of the day, a lot of these tokens come with voting power, and the way that folks kind of value like what a network is worth is by applying some of the more traditional financial models like discounted cash flow analysis and whatnot to kind of back out, oh, hey, this protocol is doing $100 million in revenue. I think its PE ratio is X, and like, here's what I think it's worth, right? And this is how people generally model how some of these tokens are worth using fundamentals.
We'll get into that maybe later. I didn't, yeah, I want to talk about DCF perhaps. I want to talk about, however, top of my list of things to discuss is going to be the hidden costs in DeFi. People don't know what they are, but there are hidden costs, right? So, what are those hidden costs as we head into the rest of 2024?
Totally. I think there's a lot of like gotchas or things that you need to look out for. Some of them are more obvious, like gas fees, and then you have stuff that is a little more complicated and difficult to quantify slash wrap your head around, like loss versus rebalancing. So let me start with kind of like the easier ones and then work my way down. So say the most obvious one is gas fees, particularly on something like Ethereum, especially when the network is really congested, those can become really, really expensive. And if you're just going through MetaMask and just like confirming your transactions and not really paying attention to how busy things are, those can end up costing, tens, hundreds of dollars, especially over the long run. In the context of like trading or managing your portfolio, there's a few key terms I would say. The first of which is slippage. So that's basically like the difference between the price, like when you submit your trade and when it actually executes. And so that is something you really need to be aware of, because if you submit an order with a very, very high slippage limit, like 10, 20%, that can end up, the price can end up moving against you pretty significantly, and you're going to end up with way less tokens than you were hoping for. Another one to look out for is called price impact. And so that's basically like how much your trade will change the market price. And I would say for dealing with these sort of things, it's really helpful to use something like a DEX aggregator. So some examples of that are like LlamaSwap, 1inch, or Matcha. And they basically make it really easy for you to access liquidity that's in a bunch of different places to make sure that you're getting the best price. In the context of providing liquidity to Uniswap or other automated market makers, you have to watch out for what's called impermanent loss. And so that's basically value that you would lose relative to holding those same assets just like in your wallet and not putting them into an automated market maker. Another really important one is called maximal extractable value. And so that is when basically the people who are constructing these blocks before they're included in the blockchain are able to order transactions in a particular way to kind of like basically extract value from unknowing participants. And so for that, the best way to protect yourself is to use a RPC provider that basically helps to protect you from that. So I think one of the most popular ones would be like Flashbots Protect. And there's also other solutions like MEV Blocker that can help with that. And then finally, one of the newer terms on the block, and this is something that I'm personally really excited about in the context of Cove, is this concept of loss versus rebalancing. And that basically is trying to quantify how, if you provide liquidity to an automated market maker, how much like of a difference is there versus if you had just kept that position yourself and like manually rebalance your portfolio. And so this kind of pops up in the context of these automated market makers because for most liquidity providers, it's not actually profitable for them to keep their money, in these things for long periods of time. Basically, the amount of fees that they make out is dwarfed by losses, right, from some of these other factors that I just mentioned.
So I want to dive into some of these terms. You know, the landscape is very different now than it was even a couple of years ago, because a couple of years ago, your market makers were the FTXs and the Grayscales and the Celsiuses and all those. They're gone. Well, Grayscale's not gone, of course, but a lot of these centralized market makers are gone, and they've been replaced by automated market makers, right? So how are these AMMs, we'll call them AMMs, faring with this loss versus rebalancing concept, and what are some of the major challenges with their approaches?
Yeah, honestly, there aren't that many solutions out there to trying to help mitigate loss versus rebalancing. It's relatively new, and I think for most of the industry, people have kind of just accepted like this is how it's going to be, and that's one of the things that we're hoping to change at Cove. I'd say the closest solution that's been announced right now is CowSwap has put out a new type of automated market maker where it basically runs an auction to rebalance the pool. And that is probably the best proposed solution that's out there right now.
So when we're talking about rebalancing losses, we're talking about rebalancing of pools of liquidity and not rebalancing like portfolios managed by the makers, right? Like what I'm still trying to understand the concept.
Totally. I think it would help if we zoom out for 1 second and just consider like how automated market makers work.
Okay.
So you kind of think of them as like token vending machines, right? We could put, let's say we had a machine, we put in like 10 Sunil tokens and 10 Hazan tokens, right? Over time, basically anybody can come and put in one of the tokens and take out some amount of the other token, right? And there's some basically math equation that determines, what that number is. And then over time, as more people are, putting in one of the tokens and taking out some amount of the other, that number, which was like 10 and 10 initially, is going to go, become a little bit out of whack, right? It could be there's now like 11 Sunil tokens and 9 Hazan tokens. And you just mentioned like market makers and more generally like arbitrageurs. This is when they kind of come into the picture, right? They see like, oh, this machine's stock is out of whack, right? I can go in and put in, one of the tokens that there's less of, and I'll make money because the machine stock is out of whack. So that's kind of a mental model for how you can kind of think about how these automated market makers work, right? The key difference is that math equation that determines how much you get changes between different market makers.
I understand that. Yep. Good. Thank you. Um, So that whole thing is new, right? And I guess you can make a lot of money being an arbitrager if you have the right bot.
Totally. Yeah. But I think that's a space that's become really, really competitive. Like if you just started to do this, before MEV became a popular term, I think there was a lot of free money that was out there that if you had the skill set, you could become a searcher and compete for. But I think nowadays the space has evolved, quite a bit. There's one very famous searcher that you might have heard of called Jared from Subway.
Yeah,
um, and he's kind of just he's running the show.
got it. So you said another word there. You said maximal extractable value, and I think I've had four guests try to explain it to me. I still don't get it. Um, but what is it, and what are the problems with it, and how do we mitigate those problems?
Totally. Yeah, you might have heard this term in a couple of different, I guess, phrases. Minor extractable value was kind of the more specific term that popped up, and then the generalized version is maximal extractable value. They both have, the term MEV for short, and so that's probably the most popular way to refer to this. And it's a really difficult problem to solve. There's a lot of smart people that are much more intelligent than I am that are working on the frontier of how you can mitigate this. For example, Flashbots is working on their Swab chain, which enables some really cool use cases. Um, this is a problem that we are tackling at Cove. We've basically came up with a new protocol that is able to represent any sort of like on-chain portfolio or position and manage it without loss versus rebalancing, effectively just earning more for liquidity providers. And that's something that we're really excited to get out there hopefully later this year.
So what do they? So your focus there is what? Mitigating losses, or combating the bots, or being competitive?
Yeah, I would say the kind of singular goal is just making on-chain liquidity sustainable, right? Like it should make sense for me or you to want to put our money somewhere. Like it has to make economic sense. And I think that's one question right now that there isn't a resounding yes to yet.
Right. But I do know this. I do know that when I go to like Uniswap or a wallet, and I want to trade Ethereum for an altcoin, right? It says the estimated gas fees is $10, and then the gas fees end up being $30, right? So the slippage is a big problem, right? Um, what's the best way for the average person, to deal with slippage?
So what you just mentioned, are you talking about the gas fees changing?
Uh, I didn't think I don't really like. I used to be the gas fees changed, but it's um, and it is the fees, right? But I don't know like what is driving that, and like why within a couple seconds that changes so fast. And I'm thinking of slippage, but it might not be.
Yeah, I think when I think of slippage, I usually am thinking about that in terms of like making an actual property of the trade, versus gas prices. What you'd mentioned, Ethereum recently introduced EIP 1559, which kind of changed how people specify these gas prices. It used to be that you basically just like put in a fixed number, like let's say 50, and that was the like static price that your transaction would be at. EIP 1559 changed that up so you can kind of specify a priority fee for your transaction to be included. So instead of the mat just being straightforward, like it's just 50, It could be like you say your priority fee is 1, and then whatever the base fee is can basically jump up over time, right? So it could end up being like when you look at it, the base fee is 50, so you'd only be paying 51, but then by the time you submit your transaction and it gets included, that jumps up, right? It could be 100 after, and then you'd end up paying 101, right? Which would end up in kind of a situation like what you just described.
Right. So that's what I was thinking of a slippage. And your slippage is what?
I'm thinking of slippage. Like, let's say I have $1 of USDC and I am going to swap it for USDT, right? If when I place the trade, I'm expected to get back 95 cents. And then when the trade actually executes, if I get 90 cents, that 5 cents is slippage, right? The difference between the price when I place the trade versus what it actually executed at.
Got it. So then with the high frequency traders, them being subject to this, how are they going to be profitable? how does that work, and what are the risks that high frequency traders face, and how do we mitigate those?
Totally. I would say that kind of the problems facing high frequency traders are not things like most normal people like you or me really need to worry about. They get into like timing games and buying access to internet that's like closer to exchanges and other things like that. And they're also must like quite sophisticated actors. So for all of these things like price impact, slippage, MEV, like impermanent loss, whatnot, the folks who are doing this well are absolutely taking all of those factors into account and like have models and infrastructure that's built to handle and deal with all that stuff.
Got it. So I'm not in that business, but it's always good for people to understand what they're going up against, right?
Absolutely.
So the best way to understand the different players now, and their trade-offs is how do we do that? What are the players? What are the trade-offs? And what are the average person competing against in the trading?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. At least for me, I found what works the best is to just actually go and try to use all these different products and like play with them. For sometimes they're only on Ethereum mainnet, which makes it a little bit difficult, especially if gas prices are higher. Since it could end up costing you $50-$100 to play with something. But if they're available on layer twos like Optimism or Arbitrum, you can go and with a few dollars basically go get a good sense for how some of these protocols work by depositing some money, placing a trade, lending some money, withdrawing your capital. And I think that experience is the easiest way to get ramped up on how different things work.
Arbitrum, Optimism, and there's a new thing out there, a new L3, I guess. I don't know what L3s are compared to L2s, but L3 called base, right? How does that work, and how are the L3s in comparison to L2s, and what's the role of DeFi?
Yeah. Well, so base is actually Coinbase's L2. So it's not an L3. It's part of it's based on the Optimism stack and is part of kind of like what they're calling the Optimism superchain. An example of an L3 would be Zygames, which my buddy Sobi is a co-founder of. They recently they're a gaming focused chain on top of Arbitrum, and they're kind of taking a unique approach to enabling on-chain games that wouldn't be possible on layer ones or layer twos.
Got it. Okay. So my next question for you is this: is everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people want to know, when this next DeFi summer is coming. What's your outlook for the DeFi industry going forward, and when is our next summer season?
Yeah, great question. I feel like the narratives in crypto, change pretty rapidly. Right now, what's currently really, really hot, I'd say, are like eigenlayer and restaking, as well as real world assets and some of these new layer twos and layer threes. There's a tremendous amount of capital right now that's locked up in Blast. I think there's like over $2 billion or so, as well as Eigenlayer. And at some point, those protocols are going to release their tokens, and some of that capital is going to look for other places to go. And so I think that might be, hopefully one of the next catalysts for renewed interest in DeFi.
I still think DeFi is going to eat Wall Street. Might be in the minority here, but in order for DeFi to eat Wall Street, how does this have to play out, or will it never?
Yeah, I think it's a process that's going to take a lot of time. Like, these older institutions are very entrenched, and they have a lot of money and political capital, and altering those is going to be quite the effort. But I think we're starting to make really good progress, right? Like, it was only earlier this year that the BTC ETFs were first approved, and I think that is a groundbreaking event for the space, because it makes buying Bitcoin or just being exposed to crypto so much more accessible, right? It used to be you would have to go, sign up at Coinbase, complete a KYC. Ideally, you're buying like a hardware wallet and setting that up before you buy Bitcoin and then withdraw it, right? And that whole process can take anywhere from a few hours, if not like days. Versus most people have a brokerage account already, right? Now you can go there, type in the ticker of one of these ETFs, click the buy button, and there you go. And so I think the inflows to these ETFs really surpassed what people were expecting. And a lot of these larger incumbents are going to start to take note of that, because, there's more money here, and that ends up being fees and profit for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I still don't think that people say that retail is here. I still don't see it, because whenever people that I grew up with or that I know ask me how to buy Bitcoin, I say, "Oh, just go to Coinbase," and they're like, "What's a Coinbase?" You know. So I said, "Oh, go to PayPal then." They know what that is. So it's still going to take a while, I think. But yeah.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that take. I don't think we've seen retail really come out in full force yet. As you mentioned, I think the Coinbase app and the Coinbase app ranking is one of the metrics that people will kind of look at as a proxy for how much of retail is here yet. And we're still a ways off from, Coinbase topping the App Store.
Yeah, I agree. So very cool. So I want to thank you very much for taking your time today to speak to me. I enjoyed our conversation. I have one last question for you. And it's a simple one. It's, how can people find out more information about you, about Storm Labs? How can they learn more information about DeFi from your perspective? How can they do that?
Yeah, totally. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at DevOps199fan. You can learn more about Storm Labs at our company website, storm-labs.xyz. And the last thing that I would ask folks is, please come join Cove, become a part of our community, and you can learn more about the Cove Protocol at cove.finance. The governance token was just launched earlier this week, and we're kicking off liquidity mining on Friday. So it's a really exciting time.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me.